Welcome, Your Holiness. Your Holiness, you were forced into exile in 1959, and you established a government in Dharamsala, India, a government in exile. And you chose to make that government democratic, even though Tibet had a history of theocracy. Why did you decide on a democracy?
56, I came to India on Buddhist celebration. I invited by Indian government, so I went there. Then I also, observe Indian Parliament.
I see.
I found big contrast. The Chinese Parliament, very much disciplined.
Right. So India was an inspiration. The Indian Parliament was an inspiration.
The Indian Parliament looks no discipline, too much noisy.
Right.
And the member very proudly criticized about their leaders, their government like that. So I very much impressed. But then, 59 April, we reach India. We already, then at once we start sort of some change. Not like previous sort of system, but more sort of divisions among the sort of cabinet ministers like that. So then 60, we start work for democratization.
And were there elections at that point?
So at that time, no. Then 2001, we already achieved elected political leadership. Since then, my position is something like semi-retired position. So I really feel, that's our achievement. Now fully a democratic sort of system like that.
But you put democracy into a process, a gradual process, starting in 1959 or in the early 1960s.
Yes, that's right.
Now you have made a decision. You're the religious leader of Tibetan Buddhists, and you were the head of state, and you decided that you would step down from all of your political positions. What was the response to that?
That is sort of part of the process of democratization. I always have this sort of strong sort of view. The political institution and religious institution must be separate.
But some of the Tibetans were unhappy about this. Correct?
Oh, that's right. That's right. But this is, I think, due to lack of knowledge about the sort of global level sort of picture, and also is our own sort of the situation. I still there. So in case this is some sort of highly necessary, my involvement, I'm there.
You're still there.
Oh, but sooner or later, there will be a day without a Dalai Lama, actually. So that sooner or later will come. So the people must prepare. So much better while I alive.
And you will have a successor as a spiritual leader. As a spiritual leader, you expect to have a successor.
Oh, now that is, since the 79, I made very clear, formally and officially to Tibetan people, that the very institution of Dalai Lama should continue or not up to Tibetan people, firstly. Then in case majority of Tibetan people and also some other concerns of the people about Dalai institution, then if they want to keep this institution, then it will remain. Then the question of successor, whether we should follow our traditional way or new way.
I'm wondering, first, what is your reaction to what is happening in the Middle East, where you see uprisings against autocratic rulers?
I think firstly, the rule by kings or religious leaders that now already outdated. Even like British, Japan, the royal still remain, but just a symbolic. But otherwise, these are now just past of history. Then these leaders, I think initially, maybe some, you see, they, with support of the people, like most of these revolutionary movement, without people's support, you see, they will not success. So the people support there originally. But then once, I think like the Chinese communist, and also I think to some extent, I think the Lenin, Bolshevik sort of revolution. Initially, I think poorer section of the people really support the early period of the revolution, I think like any other, I think very pure. And people support also there. Then, unfortunately, those individuals who are lacking moral principle, self-discipline, and once you see get power, then power corrupted themselves. Then eventually, their original sort of idea is serving to people. Then eventually, due to power, they love to see control power, control people.
Is that inevitable, do you think? That they would become corrupted?
Oh, yes, I think, yes. And sometimes, see, it's quite sort of, I say, natural. Those people who lead a certain movement, they have self-confidence and determination. But sometimes, eventually, self-confidence over self-confidence.
Over self-confidence, right.
Then, you see, they're very sensitive about criticism towards them. I always is telling people, even the world level, world belongs to people. The world belongs to nearly 7 billion human beings, not kings or religious leaders like that, or different parties.
Right.
Like United States belongs to American people, like China or Egypt belongs to the people, not few ruling families or individual. So therefore, then they, in order to sort of carry the responsibility about your own country by the people, then the best system is through election, elected leadership. That also from time to time, election. That's, I think, best way to rule the country by the people, for the people. So democratic system is the best.
So you are supportive of what is happening in the Middle East now? You think that's a good thing?
Oh yes, that's quite natural.
Yeah.
Now important, I want to share. Now they must carry sense of responsibility or commitment and build the nation. And democracy, in the name of democracy, freedom, and express all sorts of things, and doing either work, less work, and sometimes too much criticize each other, and a little bit chaotic situation. That's not good. Now work hard. There may be different views or different sort of the ideology or different sort of the belief. Okay, doesn't matter, but must work together and build new society. That's very important.
Let's talk about the Tibetan situation. So you have talked about meaningful autonomy.
Yes.
For Tibet, and that does not mean complete independence as a separate country, correct?
That's right. Okay. That's right.
So could you describe what meaningful autonomy would mean in relationship to China?
Why we are not seeking independence or separate? Because the world is changing. I always look sort of with admiration the spirit of European Union. The people, you see, thinking the common interest is more important than national sort of interest alone. So with Tibet also, no matter what past history, now Tibet materially backward. Every Tibetan want to modernize I frankly speaking, quite a bit is a Tibetan illegally immigrated to United States. Why? They come to America not seeking spirituality, but seeking money.
Right.
So Tibetans also is want richness, rich. And therefore, say, in order to material development, we remain within the People's Republic of China. We get greater benefit. Like railway, construction of railway links.
Yes.
These are the indication, the further development, provided used properly. Now, so far, they use mainly military sort of purpose like that. So in any way, so that's one way. That also is our own interest. And the People's Republic of China as a whole, Tibet, not separate, remain within the People's Republic of China. And that's the Chinese topmost concern.
So are you making progress towards autonomy?
Not yet.
Are you talking to the Chinese?
Oh, yes.
Do representatives talk to the
Oh,
Chinese?
yes. Several occasions now, since 1979, we developed direct contact with the Chinese government when Deng Xiaoping there. My personal emissary met Deng Xiaoping, and then it just started this sort of dialogue with the Chinese government. No sort of positive result like that. And meanwhile, inside Tibet, things becoming worse and worse.
I wanted to ask you about that. So what are the conditions like inside Tibet?
Now, Chinese military personnel much increase, and the security personnel also much increase, one side. So, rule of fear, rule of terror there. And then, meantime, about, I think, more than 10 years ago, one Chinese party secretary of the autonomous region of Tibet, you see, people, they knows he is a type of hardliner. So after he came at one party meeting, he actually, mentioned ultimate source of threat, Tibet being separate from mainland China, is Tibetan Buddhist faith. So accordingly, since then, they're stepping up, control sort of education. And in education, like Lhasa University, before that, they also, in their sort of curriculum, also include some classic sort of Tibetan text, but all stop. Then stepping up in the monasteries or nunnery, political education. At that time, local Tibetan expressed now semi-culture revolution returning. So his sort of hardliner policy, narrow-minded, short-sighted sort of policy, really causing 2008 crisis.
Right.
Like that.
The 2008 crisis, the
Yes.
uprising. And
Yes.
you just said semi-cultural revolution.
Yes.
And that's not happening anywhere else in China, only in Tibet.
Yes, at that time, even the other Tibetan area, in different sort of Chinese provinces, comparatively better. Now these areas also more tightening. Just I received very recently one. Now, for example, the last year, the number of Tibetan schools in this area outside autonomous region, the new policy now all subject must taught through Chinese sort of language. And Tibetan language, only just a language. Other subject must be taught by Chinese language. Then, just a few days ago, I received one information. Some school, the Chinese local police raided and they search different books in the students' home. And they, all the book, Tibetan Tibetan text, or Tibetan some books, they all remove. And now on, they only can read and keep those sort of book which officially sort of issued. So really it's a tightening.
Tightening.
Oh.
So, Your Holiness, is there anything that Tibetans can do in order to, let's say, resist? Are there tactics that they can use? For example, boycott or somehow resisting in a non-violent way
Yes.
to what's happening?
So that, I think, this recall 1956 when I was in India. Some Gandhian freedom fighter, they told me their experience as how to carry sort of disobedience
Right.
and some kind of a civil sort of certain movement. Then I told them, the British imperialist, quite bad, but still there is independent judiciary and also freedom of expression. Now the new ruler in Tibet, no independent judiciary, and no freedom of expression. Mahatma Gandhi, from prison, he can write an appeal to court, but in the communist authoritarian system, impossible. So in any way, very difficult. So, of course, the other sort of the way of sort of expression of opposition or resentment, then they will do. But there's no other choice except some demonstrations. Then as soon as demonstrations happen, then they give the name toppling government. So arrest, and once they arrest, sort of serious torture. Many people who arrested, then when they come out, either it's a broken leg or hand like that.
But what about support from outside, from the United States or from other countries? Would that help?
Oh yes, long run, very helpful. So externally, you see the sort of a lot of government and including the United States, you see, raise a human rights issue and these things. And meantime, within the country, intellectuals is really showing their resentment. They want more freedom of speech, like that. So the both sides, within the country and external. And then also, I think those people within the country who really carrying some change, sort of some freedom. You see, they, when outside world showing interest, showing concern about them,
right,
is immense sort of what's the source of encouragement. This is very, very important.
And you mentioned freedom of religion, and you also said that the Chinese were trying to suppress Tibetan Buddhism. How important is religion in the movement for freedom in Tibet, for meaningful autonomy?
Tibetan spirit very much linked with Buddhist faith. Like Polish spirit, you see, the different sort of difficult circumstances during Nazi occupation and during Soviet sort of occupation, a lot of difficulties. But during this period, the Polish national spirit and Catholic faith combine, keep their spirit.
Right.
Tibetan case, exactly same. National sort of interest and Buddhist faith combined. And anyway, I always telling the Tibetan cultural heritage. Basically, I describe culture of peace, culture of non-violence. Even Chinese officials also, you see, admit that the Xinjiang sort of problems and Tibetan problem. One time, the one Chinese officials mentioned Tibetan are Buddhist, so basically non-violent. So they less sort of worry. Even officials mention like that. So therefore, the Tibetan culture culture of peace, culture of compassion.
Right.
So that eventually immense benefit to millions of young Chinese in mainland China. And then also, now China, look, the corruption, immense, all levels.
Right.
So just you see, few
So the
people,
moral values that...
few people you see, death sentence, killed. That's not answer.
Right.
Unless some kind of inner sort of spirit of discipline
Right.
Develop. For that, I think all the different religious traditions, immense help, and including Buddhism. So therefore, long run, for Chinese own interest, it is very important to keep Tibetan compassionate sort of spiritual sort of tradition.
To keep the culture alive.
Yes.
I have one, unfortunately, we're running out of time, so I have one last question. I wondered if you have a message for people around the world who are struggling for freedom.
I think people have to carry their spirit and their struggle. And I think possibly non-violent way. Long run, that's more effective. But sometimes it's out of desperate, like Egypt or some other places, there is some also the exceptional. But now Libya,
Right.
some exceptional.
Right.
But generally, I think should be, I think non-violent way, like I think the way topple also the Philippine dictator,
Yes.
Marcos or something.
Right. Right.
Peaceful popular movement, and also Chile, I think. So the popular sort of peaceful movement is now become, I think the reality. And I think comparatively, South Africa also see peaceful ways change finally. So I think that I want to share. Please keep determination, willpower, because we have the justice. In my lifelong experience or observation, ultimately, truth always remains stronger than power of force or power of gun. Very clear. The gun, temporarily very powerful. Everybody loves one's own life. So when gun shows, you see, they out of fear, you see, little discipline there. But that's a temporary method. I think world history shows that. So therefore, the struggle for freedom, democracy, is really, the right, reasonable, and everybody has the right to be free.
Thank you. That's an excellent place to end. Thank you very, very much, Your Holiness, for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.